what may often be seen as success, and I think this is common for all of us as leaders, or what may be interpreted as thriving success, is often built upon the back of failures or things that
Yes.
didn't work. And I think we can all, as leaders, acknowledge that and realize that the old adage that says, wisdom is developed from lessons learned from mistakes. And that's been, I suppose, a significant part of my leadership development.
Welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. I really hope this episode helps you learn and master the skills you need to grow your leadership effectiveness and enjoyment. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get notified as soon as I post a new session so you don't miss a single episode. I'd also greatly appreciate any reviews, likes, and shares that you can give me. It just helps me extend my reach to more people. So leaders, I know just how frustrating it can feel when you're in the weeds of work or ministry and life is chaotic, you're struggling to feel effective, and you're just not enjoying leadership as much as you could be. And so to help you, after many years of leadership and executive coaching, I've developed a framework called the Christian Leader Blueprint that'll guide you to find clarity in your life and leadership. It'll help you gain a better rhythm of life. It'll help you see yourself more clearly, to leverage your strengths, and you'll produce more productive relationships. It's a step-by-step guide to leadership transformation. And I have that in two formats now. I have a free short guide that you can find on ryanfranklin.org, and I have a book, The Christian Leader Blueprint. And you can find that in any format, including an audiobook, wherever you buy your books. I have a few more things on my website that you may be interested in, so just head on over to ryanfranklin.org and check it all out. And now, let's get to our session. Welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast. Today is a unique episode. Today, I'm interviewing a very special guest who lives on the opposite side of the globe from me. We have the opportunity to get into the world of the General Superintendent of the United Pentecostal Church of Australia, and his name is Stanley Harvey. So, Brother Stanley, welcome to the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. It's an honor, especially after seeing all the incredible guests that you have had on your podcast. I'm honored to be here and part of this great platform.
Well, we are so honored to have you. Normally, I would introduce the guest, but I think it would be better. A lot of your bio had a little bit of your testimony in it. And I think it would be better coming from you. We're going to jump into the subject of urban growth and visionary leadership from your perspective as a general superintendent and as a pastor. But before we do that, would you mind just introducing yourself and maybe giving a little of your testimony to the audience?
Absolutely. Yes, most certainly. I was born in the Philippines, actually, to Filipino parents. So my testimony is a little bit different in that I didn't grow up in church. At a young age, my biological parents were separated, and my mom married her boss at the time, who's an Australian who was educated in the States. So he's not your typical Aussie in that he sounds more American than he does Australian. And so we were adopted by him because he married my mom. And so at a young age, we left the Philippines at the age of 5 or 6, grew up and spent my formative years in Singapore, where I grew up in an expatriate community, so a community of people from all around the world. And my mom was very diligent in ensuring that she took us to the Catholic Church. We were there every Sunday. But I was surrounded by a very secular kind of culture as far as the expatriate community was concerned. Then moved to Singapore to Sri Lanka rather, from Singapore for about 3 years because of my dad's job. My dad's job took him in different places. And my father was not a very loving man. He was an ex-military, fought in the Vietnam War. And that really, had a psychological impact on him that was just very, very negative. And so we grew up in a home that was quite abusive, emotionally, psychologically. And so at the age of 16, as I was getting more and more, I suppose, adamant of determining my sense of autonomy, I was clashing with my father a lot more. and to the point where it was going to be fisticuffs and even grabbing weapons. And so my mother knew that something was wrong with me. She sent me to Australia to live with her brother. Her brother lived here in Sydney. And so at the age of 16, I came over here and I was like a bird out of a cage. I could finally experience the world, which I lived a very sheltered life. Had the best of educations that the money could buy growing up as a child. But when I came to Sydney, I had no mind for that. I had no desires for those things. So I went on a headlong pursuit of living a very immoral life of alcohol and drugs, and was just lost. I was spiraling. My mind was spiraling out of control. Started, I believe, was a drug-induced psychosis at the point where I was just so dark and depressed. And so I was invited to this Pentecostal church at the age of 19. So for 3 years of just being partying and being out of my mind, I finally decided to follow my friend who was going to this church out of curiosity. I just saw the change in him that really piqued my curiosity. So I went to church that Sunday night. It was at our old building. It's this same church that I'm in today, that I pastor today. But I went that night, and the first time I went there, I received the gift of the Holy Spirit. And I just remember this incredible joy that I experienced. And I just said these words in my own head. I said, this is better than all the alcohol and drugs that I've been taking all of these years. Yeah. And I just knew I found it. I knew I found God, or little did I realize it was God who found me. And so from then on, I just became part of the church. It was a series of up and downs of trying to be consistent from 19 throughout my early 20s. And then I found the calling of God. And so eventually I, got involved in little things, from opening the door, being on the cleaning roster, helping out in ministries, receiving Bible studies, and then assisting Bible studies, being in a small group. Eventually I started my own small group. Then I became an assistant youth pastor, then became youth pastor. And then eventually I was assistant pastor. And in 2009, I was elected to be the senior pastor of the Pentecostals of Sydney. And so, and then from there, just started getting involved, obviously, in other aspects of the church, as far as outside of the local assembly, the national work. And even I became part of the Overseas Missions Committee. And then in 2012, I got elected on the board as a home missions director. And then several years after that, after about 4 years, I was elected as overseas missions director, which would be equivalent to the global missions director there in the United States. Mm-hmm. And then in 2022, our general superintendent of 22 years, Bishop John Downs, retired from that role, and I was elected as general superintendent of the UPC of Australia. So that's where I am today. 2 kids. My daughter is 20 years old. My son is 16. My son Joaquin, my daughter Kiana, and then my wife Robin, obviously working alongside me in the ministry.
That's a tremendous story, from drugs and alcohol to actually getting reached and saved in a church that you would later go on to be the pastor of, and then to be the general superintendent of the whole organization. That's just a phenomenal story and a testimony. And I know that there's a lot more within that testimony that you could share, but thank you for
yes.
for sharing that today.
Yeah, the 30 years condensed into 3 minutes. And
I was going to ask you how long of a span was that? It's about 30 years.
About 30 years, and I would have never dreamed to be in these roles at all.
Yeah. Well, I had the tremendous privilege to travel to Australia just a few weeks ago and do your leaders and ministers leadership retreat. And I want to say you're doing a phenomenal job. You have a tremendous group of ministers in Australia. I loved the environment that I had the opportunity to minister in. They seem to have soaked up every word that I taught. And it's obvious that you and the general board and even Bishop Downs ahead of you guys have done a tremendous job in sort of paving the path to future generations and future Pentecost and future churches even you're doing a tremendous job from my perspective.
Well, thank you, Brother Ryan. And of course, we just so appreciated that you were willing to come all the way here with your wife to Australia. It's a long journey. But let me just say also that your ministry has had incredible impact on our ministry and leadership for all the things that you shared and taught. It was just so deep and so pertinent and relevant to what we face. And I think it has really equipped us not just for that time, but it's something that we take that's going to be a part of our long-term implementing of strategies of things that habits and things that we certainly need in order for us to develop longevity in ministry. It was deep and personal, and it was something that was quite different that we've had over many years. It's something that we really take with us. So thank you for leaving a lasting impression and impact on our ministers and leaders.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. It was just a great honor. I look back, I don't think even the magnitude of it really hit me until I was back home and kind of reflected on the weekend. It was just a tremendous thing, opportunity that I had that will carry with me for the future. I'll definitely cherish those moments and hope that it's not my last time.
Amen. I hope so. I really pray that you and I believe you'll be back here in the right time. And I'm glad, and I hope you got to understand what that crazy Australian rules football was all about.
That was pretty interesting. Didn't even know that type of football existed. But if anybody's listening to this and is curious, go Google Australian football, and you'll see a whole nother world of football out there that I didn't know existed. So,
well, in Sydney we call it aerial ping pong.
Well, let's jump into our interview.
Yes,
You're a successful pastor and general superintendent, as I mentioned. And it seems from my perspective that just about everything you do is thriving. At least I realize that not everything is going to thrive in anybody's world, but from my perspective, that's what I see. Could you tell just a little bit about the style in which you lead in that dual role? I know that that's an interesting role as a pastor, senior pastor, and a general superintendent of an entire country. Just kind of tell about the style in which you lead, if you don't mind.
thank you, Ryan. I think what may often be seen as success, and I think this is common for all of us as leaders, or what may be interpreted as thriving success, is often built upon the back of failures or things that
Yes.
didn't work.
Yes.
And I think we can all, as leaders, acknowledge that and realize that the old adage that says, wisdom is developed from lessons learned from mistakes. And that's been, I suppose, a significant part of my leadership development. I've learned more of what not to do as opposed to what to do. And so that's something that I think I had to sort of grapple with very early on in my ministry leadership development, is that to use failures. I would often get very discouraged in my early years if something didn't work, if I didn't do right. I would get so down on myself because I was a bit of I suppose you could say, a perfectionist. I was raised in a military home where how my bed was made was inspected every morning, and so there was a sense of perfection that I suppose was reared into me. But I had to learn that failures, of course, is something that I could use to fuel me, to know that this was something, another box that I would tick off as what not to do, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
And so, having said that, however, I think my leadership style, if I had to select something, and of course, we all like these personality surveys, we all have a part of one particular part of personality. But I would say that my visionary would primarily be, first and foremost, is visionary. I would probably err on the side of visionary, where I would my primary responsibility would be to cast God's vision. And I think, though I see myself as a visionary, yet I also believe I see myself as a bit of a pragmatist. And over the years, I've become fascinated with systems as the measurable sort of means by which to attain goals that lead to the fulfillment of vision. I've come to recognize, and I read a book many years ago, and forgive me that I can't sort of quote the exact book, but they had, I think it was in the early years of the Japanese car industry, where their cars that they made were just terrible. You know, the cars back in the 60s from Japan were just poorly made. They didn't last long. And so the Japanese owners of the companies, car manufacturers, hired a consultant to come in and to see what was wrong with their people. And they often believed that their people were not working hard enough, they were not efficient, they were not smart. And so the consultant came back to tell them that there's nothing wrong with your people. They work hard, they take pride in their work. He says, but it's just something wrong with the system. And so he simply gave them some of their, obviously his feedback and some strategies to improve their systems. And sure enough, the Japanese car industry began to change and develop cars that were a lot better quality, higher in quality and standard. And it wasn't the people. And so I came to see that in the church, that oftentimes in my own mind, perhaps our people just don't have it, or they're just not good enough. But I realized I had to, as a leader, create a culture where there is a system in place that would generate the things that God would want us to achieve, which is obviously underpinned by the Great Commission of preaching the gospel and making disciples. And so I began to look at how we are operating as a system, and comparing that and lining that aside alongside what Jesus wanted us to do. And so I started to make those changes. Got people to come in as consultants, as people that can give us some evaluations as to what we do, and then give us some suggestions of how we can change. And so I'm a visionary, but also I'm a pragmatist. I like systems, and I was raised.
Yeah, that's that is a part of leadership that a lot of people sometimes skirt around or miss, or they maybe it's not their forte, so they kind of put it on the back burners a little bit. But it is a critical part, and I want to talk about vision in just a minute. But systems is a critical part of implementing a vision and actually putting wheels to a vision. So I love the fact that you're able to create vision, but also create the system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've had vision for many, and the things that frustrated me was we've had vision for many years, and yet nothing was sort of changing. Vision must have legs, as you said. Vision must have stepping stones by which to fulfill that, and I think that's part of what I have to do.
Can I ask you this in regards to systems? Are you a system kind of a person? Is that your forte, or do you just recognize that systems are needed, and so you kind of rally the troops around you that are good at systems and create the systems in that manner? What side of the spectrum do you fall on there?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be a strong systems guy, but as you said, it's something that I recognized. Um, it's something that I had to sort of reconcile in my own understanding. When the scripture says that the harvest is wide and it's ready, and the harvest is great, but the laborers are few, that I had to reconcile in my own mind. If that's what God has said, then why aren't we not growing in the manner that we should have? And so there was nothing wrong with our vision. I believe it lined up perfectly with the Word of God, but it was what we were doing that needed to be changed. And so I've learned I'm not a big systems guy, but certainly recognize and learn that this is something that we really need to explore and to see if it would work. And sure enough, it made a big change, over a period of time, of course.
And I would imagine that there's people around you that are really good at systems, and because you value it so much, it just lights them up. It empowers them to be who God has made them to be, for you to value systems as much as you do.
Yeah, certainly. I do have I have my administrator who's part of our staff, Brother Greg Hackathorn, who's
Yeah, tremendous guy.
a tremendous guy, and he is a systems guy. He's a deep analytical thinker. I also have other leaders that are with us, other ministers in our church who are not necessarily part of staff. They also, that I suppose, a younger generation under me are also looking to some of those things because of their secular training, of their secular qualifications, that see systems as something very, very important. But yeah, I'm very grateful that I have capable men and women that are I guess more inclined towards those things like systems and administration structures, infrastructure, and so on.
And I would say with the level of leadership that you are in as senior pastor, but then you also have the other dynamic of general superintendent. It's very important, even if you were a systems person, you still have to empower people around you to put the wheels on the vision, because otherwise you would get bogged down and wouldn't have the time and energy to be able to do it all. So you have to use people around you to create those systems and implement those systems, regardless of what side of the road you fall on with that.
Yeah, that's spot on, Ryan. And I think you have to get a buy-in from your leaders, and that will filter down to the rest of the congregation as well, and to other leaders under them. But if I can get a buy-in from them, it is so critical for this to work. And I think once we started seeing results, they became more and more convinced, and then they took it on themselves.
Yeah.
They took the ball themselves and started running with it and implementing it into their own ministries.
It feels so good. It's empowering to know that your leader values your gifts and empowers you to do that. It brings a sense of motivation and energy that can't come any other way. And I love that you pointed that out. So vision is obviously a vital part of leadership. And I would guess that even in my interaction, if you wouldn't have even told me, I would guess that you are a high visionary type person. And so I want to ask you, how do you approach vision setting for the United Pentecostal Church of Australia, first of all, and the Pentecostals of Sydney? You've got two. Obviously, the vision is going to be very similar. In fact, as a pastor of the Pentecostals of Sydney, that may help you create vision even for the United Pentecostal Church of Australia. But in your opinion, what do you feel are the key components that make your vision compelling and actionable, that keep people moving in the right direction? So how do you approach vision setting, and what are the key components that make your vision compelling and actionable?
Yeah, I think what we have sort of employed is something that's quite common and has been used in most organizational settings, which is called SMART goals. I believe the goals need to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And I think what makes goals compelling is that it's not something that is so far fetched, so beyond attainable that you get easily discouraged. And so what we have tried to do is create uh, achievable stepping stones, obviously big enough or far enough for us to have to extend ourselves, but
Yeah.
certainly not overextending that it's beyond our reach.
What are you? Can I interrupt you there and just ask you
Sure.
how far out are you looking when you think vision? Primarily, I know it would vary from one thing to the next, but is it 3 to 5 years, 10 years? What do you like to look at when you're looking at vision?
Well, as a national organization, back in 2020, we set a 10-year goal.
Okay.
And those 10-year goals, we realized we had to put, figures and numbers, and they would be broken up into yearly objectives that we tried to aim for. So within the UPCA, and this was, I suppose, under our previous general superintendent, Brother Bishop John Downs, and myself being a part of that executive board, we set three main goals that we wanted to achieve for the organization. First of all is our leadership goals, and that's simply looked at having more licensed ministers. That's the very most basic statement about that particular goal. We knew that if we are going to grow as an organization and as local churches, we must have leaders. And so each year we have set particular numbers, and it's based on a graph of a mathematical equation that we wanted to aim for by 2030, from 2020 to 2030. And then that has below that, of course, is the stepping stones or the strategies by which to obtain or to accomplish that particular goal. Then we also have a church goal. We want to have certain number or constituency of our membership throughout the UPC of Australia. And again, that's broken up into yearly segments. And then the third goal is I suppose is not as quantifiable by numbers. It is about our apostolic or Pentecostal culture. That is part of our goal that we want to reinvigorate, to make sure that we retain our apostolic identity, that we have the gifts of the Spirit, the supernatural, if you will, as part of our culture, because we had to be careful that we don't become so, I suppose, corporate in our approach, for the lack of a better term, that we don't lose what we're all about as an apostolic movement, as a church. And so those 10-year goals are categorized under those three sections: leadership, church growth or church constituency, and church culture.
And I love the way that you're hanging on to all three at one time. And it's not either or, it's all three at one time.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have all three. You've got to have leadership.
You got to have all three.
You got to have growth in numbers, and you have to have the thing that we're here to do is, the spiritual side of things that is super necessary. But you can't have, it's sort of like Acts chapter 2, the church was born, but in Acts chapter 6, they started establishing structure and organization. And the church grew in the book of Acts because they began establishing leadership, and likely I could just imagine them creating goals to reach. It's putting those objectives ahead of people. So I'm hearing vision, long-term vision, but I'm also hearing more practical steps along the way in setting those yearly goals as part of hitting that vision. So what are some key components that would sort of make that vision compelling and actionable to the ministers of Australia, and then also to just the local church body at your local church? So before we continue on with the podcast, this episode is brought to you by Christian Leader Community Coaching. Are you a Christian leader experiencing low productivity or a chaotic lifestyle? And maybe you're overwhelmed and just unsure of what it's going to take to create growth in your life? And so I want to introduce to you our Christian Leader Community Coaching Program. Through our step-by-step framework, you're going to discover a better rhythm of life. You'll see yourself more clearly, leverage your strengths, and build more productive relationships. With our full archive of courses, our supportive community of peers, a powerful leadership assessment to get you quickly focused. We also have live community coaching and so much more. And I've personally seen its huge impact with leaders from all over the world, experiencing laser-focused growth in their lives. And now, through this community, this experience is open to you. And we want to help you implement these simple frameworks and then celebrate with you as you experience significant results in your life. Don't wait any longer. Go to ryanfranklin.org and join the Christian Leader Community Coaching today. And I look forward to seeing you inside the community. Now back to our podcast.
Yeah, I think, as I said, making these goals, setting goals that are going to be achievable. And as you have particular segments that you're achieving at each step of the way, then we've always felt that would be something that would, stir and create motivation for people. I think also having, people coming in and sharing some of their experiences as well as to how they've achieved those goals. Obviously, They are just numbers, but I think you need to put some figure. You need to have something to aim for, because it can be so, I suppose, generic. Just say, okay, we need to reach the world, or we need to make disciples. But what does that look like for them individually? How are they? If they win one soul, over 5 years, they might. Some people might see that as having won people, or if they see that there's still so many unsaved souls in the world, that might create a sense of discouragement, in that we'll never be able to reach them. And so I think having timely figures and numbers, and I'm always very careful to remind people, listen, they're just particular numbers that we're aiming for. Our greater scheme, which may seem so idealistic, is to reach everybody, but we want to put some numbers here, that we want to teach so many Bible studies a week, just to give us something to aim for. And if we don't hit that, it doesn't mean that we failed. But it just means that we look at, well, we didn't hit 20 Bible studies a week. We hit 10. Hey, that's 10 Bible studies a week, can celebrate, we can enjoy. But I think people, and I guess that's the way I sort of process it, and I think, is that we need figures. You need a target to aim at. And the old saying is, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And so I think breaking it down to achievable numbers and figures is so very helpful. If we, for example, the other year, we had so many baptisms. We had we always average about 80 to 100 baptisms. And so I said, well, this following year, this was several years ago, let's aim for 150 baptisms. And for our local church, that was like, oh, okay, well, that's wonderful. Well, we didn't quite get there, but it changed our normal sort of averages of 80 to 100 to reaching 140. So close, it was very close. And so that in itself made a big difference. But I also had to be careful that they were not sort of pushing people in the water, to try and get those numbers. Oh, it doesn't matter if you haven't repented, just get in the water. So we still had to strike that balance of aiming for a figure, aiming for a target, but there's also some considerations.
That's good, and I'm hearing you say that your vision is what is compelling people to kind of create new ways of reaching people, not only just motivation, but likely innovative ways of reaching people. Maybe even using technology and different things of that nature to do different things to reach people, and that's any way we can do any way we can use vision to compel and get people actionable is a wonderful thing.
Exactly.
So you're facing some dynamics in Sydney. It's an urban church. It's a metro area, lots of people. You've got some financial constraints with I would assume, likely with the land around you and stuff. Land is not easy to get. But despite logistical challenges that you have, I'm assuming limited parking.
Yes.
Would I be right? We have not talked about that, but I would assume limited parking. So what strategies have you implemented, not just specifically with parking, but just logistical challenges in general with growing the church in that area? What strategies have you implemented to overcome these types of obstacles in that urban environment and to continue attracting and retaining new people in your church?
Yes. Well, Ryan, I don't know if you were operating in the word of knowledge there, but parking is certainly our biggest concern and issue in Sydney. Sydney, we are pretty much very metro area where our church is located. Mm-hmm. And, whenever we have guests from the United States visiting Sydney, they're always shocked at the cost of our parking in the city. When we're driving into the city, of course, is very, very expensive. And so real estate is at a premium here. And Sydney is one of the probably the most expensive city in Australia, and in fact ranks pretty high around the world as an unlivable city because of the expense and the cost of property.
I didn't realize that. I knew it was. I knew it was quite high. I'd heard that from several people, but I didn't realize it was ranked around the world as one of the
Yes.
highest. That's
Yes,
interesting.
and so we're in a highly populated area, a high urban area, but our church is located in an industrial zone, and so
Mhm.
there's factories and warehouses, and so parking is very, very limited for us, and it's a constant struggle. The one I suppose aspect that's a positive for us is that on Sundays it is the streets are empty because people are not working. A lot of the factories and commercial properties are closed. However, it is still way too short of what we need. And so, what we did back in 2018, we have our church capacity we can only seat 500. That the council will allow us. We can probably fit more, but the council will not allow us to have any more than 500, and that's already giving us concessions because we don't have enough parking per person capacity. And so, what we decided to do is, as I've read in many church growth statistics and research, it shows that if the room is 75% full, then it is already considered full. And so we were
And I
jam
wonder
packed.
if in post-COVID, if it's more like 65,
Exactly.
that would be full today.
Yeah, I think that would certainly be relevant post COVID. Everything kind of changed.
Yeah.
But just prior to COVID in 2018, we said we'll need to we need a bigger building, but we just couldn't afford it. It was just we needed at least $10 million just to buy the property without building in order for us to have something bigger. And so
Wow.
we decided that we would just increase the capacity by doubling our service. So I know a lot of churches, even in the United States, are doing this.
Yeah.
We created a multiple service on Sunday mornings. So we essentially went from a 500 seater sanctuary to a 1,000 seater sanctuary, and that also meant that our parking would increase because we would have one group leave, which would make more space for the next group. And so we took a step by faith. We didn't know how that was going to go, and we had our Sunday night services, which was really, to be honest with you, it was dwindling. We People weren't coming.
Mhm.
It was just the faithful few, and any new people would only come Sunday morning. They would never come Sunday evening, and I suppose that's part of the demographic culture here in Sydney that we just couldn't get them there on Sunday nights. And so we decided, as we go to multiple service, that we would remove our Sunday night. Um, and really, that was for some people that was a big decision, but
Yeah.
it didn't take us very long to realize that that was the best decision, because after two back-to-back services on Sunday morning, we're
There,
just exhausted.
there's no way. Yeah.
There's no
No
way.
way. No way.
And within weeks, Ryan, we immediately saw people coming in, people getting saved, and it was incredible. It did not take us very long to see that this was one of the best decisions that we've made in a very long time. And so, having done that, we created more space, and we created more parking, and so that's been really quite a positive for us, and it's really
Mhm.
helped us.
Tremendous. Tremendous. Well,
And of
let's.
course,
Yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to add one of the other things I was going to say is also, of course, we don't have our midweek services anymore
Hmm.
because Sydney is so busy. It is, and people live quite far apart. We've decided that we were going to do connect groups, small groups, in different locations in people's homes during the week, and during our school breaks, our school holidays. Then we would have midweek and invite people to come, and that's when I would do more pastoral teaching as well. But still, then they wouldn't be coming because it's just so far, or they
Yeah.
get home late because they get caught in traffic, and so that's, like as you said, social media or the internet, live streaming, and those kind of technologies have been very, very helpful for us
Hmm.
to be able to still get connected, as additional parts of our ministry.
Just curious, do you have any small groups as well that are meeting on Zoom rather than meeting in homes? Do you do that as well?
Yes, we do. We do have that option.
Hmm.
Um, Particularly for some of our busier sort of groups, they would prefer to meet online, and that's worked very well. And we encourage them to make sure that they supplement that with gathering together as well for the fellowship face to face, and
Yeah.
they do that on occasion, and that's worked quite well for us.
I think Zoom is the way I see it is I would rather be in person. That's like eating a steak, but Zoom is like eating a hamburger. It's still nourishing.
Yes.
It's still, you can still connect with people and talk with people just like we're doing right here online. Obviously, it would be better face to face, but sometimes that's not possible. And I think it's a good secondary option. And you have the gathering on each Sunday as well, where people see each other face to face. But I love the thought of even occasionally when they, maybe when time permits, occasionally scheduling a face to face with those Zoom group meetings as well, just to kind of get in one another's world a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think, and that's a great analogy, Ryan. That is still feeding them and still getting them connected. But
Uh-huh.
what's really what we're seeing, of course, after COVID, the new people, the new ones that come to church getting saved and want to do Bible studies, they are more of them are opting to have Bible studies on Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
and so that they don't have to travel out, or they don't have to necessarily have the house spotless clean to have somebody come in and teach Bible studies.
Yeah,
And obviously in the metropolitan area, that is something that is so common and well accepted now. So
that's one
absolutely.
thing that COVID did in a positive way for us, is it
Yes, sir.
escalated the opportunities to be online and be able to um, I guess accept the fact that it is okay to meet online occasionally in a Zoom room and have a Bible study or have a small group, do a teaching. That is a acceptable thing, and it's still a nourishing and a good thing for people.
Yeah, exactly.
So, getting in your personal world just a little bit, if you don't mind, managing the responsibilities of you got a ton of them, I'm sure, as pastor and as general superintendent. I'm sure you're flooded with the responsibilities. You also have a family, and uh, I'm sure that takes some pretty good organizational skills. How do you balance the demands of those two roles effectively?
Yeah, it's certainly been a challenge, and thankfully, what has helped me, of course, is in both cases, both in the local church and as a national organization. I get to work with an incredible group of people and an executive board, the board members that are just wonderful men that I've worked alongside with, and so as well as our staff in the church and leadership, our volunteer ministers, our volunteer leaders. It's what's really helped me, of course, is being able to have a team to work together with that I can delegate. And of course, delegation is something that is an ongoing skill that I've had to try and become better and better at. I wasn't great at it. I prefer to do things on my own, being again that sort of perfectionist mentality. I thought I
Yeah.
might as well just do it. But I'm seeing, having been in this role for a couple of years, I had no choice but to delegate. And of
What's your
course, it
key?
empowers.
Well, it empowers people. What's your
Yes.
key to effective delegation? What do you feel like helps you in that role the most? Being a perfectionist and wanting to do it yourself, but you're able to do it. Is there anything particular that you would pin as the key to your effective delegation?
Yeah, I think I would often ask when I look at my tasks, and I would ask myself the question: can somebody else do this? Does it really need my fingerprints on this, or is it just something that somebody else can do? And so I have to ask those questions.
And
Obviously, there
maybe even taking it a step forward and saying, can they do it good enough?
exactly, exactly, and often it may be something that I believe in the long term, and ask the question: can they? Is this something that I will have to keep doing, or is this something that somebody else could do? And then I think a key to it is that you empower them by teaching them or training somebody what needs to be done. They may not do it exactly the way I do it, but certainly the quality could be there, provided that I'm responsible for ensuring that I'm not dumping, but I am
Mm-hmm.
actually empowering them by teaching them and showing how it can be done. If it's something that obviously that they can use their own sort of flair and their own sort of personality in executing that particular task, I would welcome that.
Yes.
But I think avoiding dumping is important. But
But you give them some lanes to make their own decisions and how they're going to accomplish a task or lead a ministry or whatever. So regarding delegation, what do you feel is effective communication? How does that look like when you're effectively communicating with a person you've delegated to?
I think I have to write it down. I think first of all, you can explain it to them, you can share it with them verbally,
Yeah.
but they also need to have it in writing so that they can always refer back to it. And so it
Mhm.
also helps me to process the information that I am sharing with them, that I'm having to convey, that I have it written down. If it can be written down in a way that's understandable, then they're not going to understand it either. I suppose if I'm communicating just verbally. So I think
Yeah.
you need to have that both written. And I often say, if there's no paper trail, if it's not in writing, then it didn't happen. Then we
Yeah.
didn't have these conversations. Especially in my role,
That's
I have
good.
numerous people in the church saying, "Oh, I said this. I was going to go here, and I told you this, that, or the other." And I said, "Well, it's not in writing. I can't go back to that." And so that's what I try to encourage all of our leaders. That even if it's something simple, give it to me either in a text message or in an email, preferably an email where it's easily accessible. And so I have to take that same approach when I'm delegating.
Yeah.
When I want somebody to do something, I will talk to them, but I also have it in email. And sometimes the email comes first, and then I'll have that conversation with them so that it's clearly communicated and they
So
understand.
you're not just verbally communicating. You're not just emailing. You're sort of given a combination because you need the relational side of it, but you also need the paper trail side of it to make sure that lines are clear and things are communicated thoroughly.
I think that's perfect, Ryan. I think because we are in a church and we work mainly with our volunteers, the relational side of it is vital.
Yeah.
That we don't want to just be a corporation or a machinery. I think we even in sharing and delegating responsibilities, there's still that element of that relationship, and when there's that relationship, people will do anything for you. We are willing
True.
to help one another and go to the furthest extent because we love this person, and we're not doing it just for a job because it's not a job. They're not getting paid for the most part.
Yeah.
And so the relational side is so important, not because we want to get things done, but because it refreshes our souls. It
Hmm.
empowers us that we can have this brotherhood and that fellowship, and at the same time work together in accomplishing the work of God. So, yeah, spot on.
Very
I
good.
think also I was just going to add as well a part of balancing roles, of course, is I've had to be more intentional with my scheduling, intentional with my time, and what's been very helpful for me is I use what's called the productivity planner
Hmm.
by Intelligent Change. It's actually an American company, and I don't know if you've heard of it, but
I've never heard of it.
it uses the productivity planner. It's a little bit like a diary, but you start off your week with your five main sort of big goals that
Hmm.
or tasks that you want to have accomplished that you believe will be critical in what you do, and then the next five additional tasks, and then the next five, and then you have your daily tasks, and so you put your task number one is out of the top five that you want to accomplish, and it's what's called the Pomodoro system. Pomodoro, I don't know if you've heard of that. The Pomodoro system is a Pomodoro is a tomato in Italian, and the Pomodoro is simply 25-minute segments before having a 5-minute break. And so, because I'm a perfectionist, often are procrastinators, and that's been my weakness is procrastination.
Yeah.
And when I found this system, it's helped me because the Pomodoro system is, for example, if my first task is to write a blog, for example, I will write in the box next to it how many Pomodoros or how many 25 minutes I require to complete that task. So I may say to write a
Wow.
blog is going to require me 3 sets of Pomodoros. So I put 3 in the box, and then I'll set a timer. And for a procrastinator like me, the timer is what sets me off. So I'll press start, and then I will start within that 25 minutes, even if I don't have the perfect start to an article or to a blog article. I just have to do something for 25 minutes. Whether the start of the beginning of a sermon, for example, is not ideal, I just start writing the sermon. I just start writing the article. And then after 25 minutes, my alarm will go off, and then I'll take a 5-minute break. I literally stand up from my desk. I'll walk, get a glass of water, whatever, stretch, and then it kind of resets your mind again. And then, I've got 2 more Pomodoros in it, and then starts again. And then you circle the 3 Pomodoros that each one that you complete. And
That's
so for
really
me,
good.
that has been a godsend to making sure that I accomplish the main tasks that I have for my scheduling as a superintendent, but also as a pastor. That is still one of my primary responsibility.
I really like that. That's I'm gonna have to try that one. I love that. I love that
Absolutely.
thought of doing that. You mentioned procrastination as a perfectionist. A lot of times that will kind of move over into our decision making as leaders as well. And people that will struggle with perfectionism and procrastination will also struggle with a little bit of worry when they're having to make big decisions that will impact a lot of people. When there's a lot riding on a decision, or somebody could make a decision even too hastily. And so, what's your process for you for decision making strategic and timely decisions, especially when they impact your local church and the national organization? What's your strategy for that?
Well, of course, this presupposes that prayer and fasting and meditating God's word has already been done.
Yeah.
For a procrastinator like me, something that was profound for me, and this may sound overly simplistic to some folks, but what was profound to me from what was shared to me by my late pastor, Bishop Ted Slack. Bishop Slack was one of the pioneers, I suppose, of the church in Australia. He was my pastor. And he said to me, he said, Stan, you won't always make the right decision, but you've got to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think every major decision, every significant decision that's going to have a profound impact on our churches and our organization, you must have a time, you must have a cutoff time to a deadline that you have to make that decision. And so I think that's critical, because you can be mulling over an issue forever and a day, but you have to make that decision. And so if still there is a lot of conjecture with which way to go, come deadline, that old saying from my bishop is, it might not be the right decision, but you have to make a decision, because not making a decision is making a decision.
Yeah.
But not deciding, you've already made a decision. And so that's, to me, the first step of decision making. Go ahead.
Making a deadline is huge, and I guess depending on what you're having to make the decision on would depend on the amount of time you give yourself. If it's a smaller day-to-day decision, could give yourself a 15-minute deadline, or I'm going to mull over this for the morning, and then right after lunch I've got to make the decision on this. Is that kind of how you talk through it yourself?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I talk through it. For example, one of the struggles that we have as pastors, obviously, is a sermon for Sunday, and for the longest time, I would struggle as to know what to preach, and I would get all the way to Saturday night and still not know what to preach. And so I've had to create a deadline to say by the latest Wednesday or Tuesday, I have to have what my message will be. So I begin to meditate and work on that. Of course, I've also incorporated things such as sermon series that have been very helpful for me. And I know well in advance what I'm going to be ministering on. And I found it hasn't, diminished in any way. It hasn't affected any way the sense of anointing, or I suppose the conviction or the compulsion of what God has wanted to say.
But I can
So
tell you
that's
what
been
it I
critical.
can tell you what it has done. It's helped your team who's waiting to build a sermon graphic or something like that. It's that's the people that impacts in a negative way whenever we do delay. And
Yeah,
so
that is so true. That is so true. And the team, our media team is someone, they're always very thankful if when I give to them in advance what we're going to be ministering on because it gives them time. Absolutely. And some of them are not procrastinators. A lot of them, are very time. They need to have it spot on, which, is something that has helped them when I've been able to do that. Definitely.
yeah.
I think also part of decision making is having, and again, I refer back to my bishop who said this. This was a saying that would stick to my mind. He says, "I use all the mind that I have, and all the mind that I can borrow."
Mm.
And so this gives the idea of just ensuring that we're thinking through everything that God has given to us, our own mental faculties, our own sense of experience, and the wisdom that we've been able to accumulate to help us with our decisions. And so I have the team. Anything major, obviously, I have our team of ministers that relates to ministry things, our church board that relates to the fiscal aspects of decision making, and then I also have a more intimate group, just like I suppose the three that Jesus had. I have assistant pastors and others that I will consult with to get their thoughts and their feedback, and to ensure that it's a decision that I sense that others are also seeing a perspective that they can share with me.
That's so good getting the buy-in of the team around you. That's so
Yes.
vital to the success. It's so vital to putting the wheels to the vision that you have.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also I go through a list of questions, such as these. Does this decision contravene our rules? Is it in line with our goals and our mission? Are we creating any precedents as a result of a particular decision that we make either direction? What is the risk and reward ratio for this decision? Is it kingdom directed? Can it be trialed and measured? Can it be just a temporary trial? And so those kind of questions I utilize to making sure that I'm making the best decision possible.
Yeah. So um, obviously a lot of pressure, and I could just imagine the pressure that comes with the job that you have as a general superintendent, and as senior pastor. It's just there's an enormous amount of pressure that comes with that stress. Can you share a little bit about the pressure that you feel, and share how you manage the pressures of that day to day personal and the intertwining of your personal life and the organizational life, and how that impacts you, and how um, you deal with that in a day to day basis?
Yeah, my life was a lot easier up until I got elected as superintendent. It's a whole nother kettle of fish. Having pastored for many years, you get into a very good rhythm of knowing how to handle pressure.
Yeah.
But then when you become superintendent, there's a whole nother level of responsibility and people you deal with. I'm not just dealing with our local church. We are having to work together with pastors, and for the most part, our leadership, our pastors are phenomenal. But of course, again, presupposing the devotion, my devotional life, obviously being key to being able to handle pressure.
Hmm.
I'm reminded of the scripture that we're not given too much information about the time from Jesus' birth to when he started his ministry. Those were the silent years, I suppose, as far as scripture is concerned. But there is one passage where it says in the Word of God that Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. And those four components speaks to, of course, a balance of our spiritual favor with God and men, social or emotional. And then there is grew in wisdom and in stature, so the intellectual and your physical health. And for me to be able to handle stress, I think all four aspects needs to be in tandem, in balance. working together, ensuring that I am paying attention and developing those four components in my life. And that helps me to handle pressure, the physical sort of health. If am not looking after myself physically, then it would probably exacerbate that sense of pressure. And so balance for me has been the key to being handle the pressure, that I'm not just working, as it were, on a treadmill constantly, but I'm taking time away. So creating that rhythm of your weekly schedule where I have a Sabbath once a week, but also take sabbatical time off during the year where I'm spending time with family and resting and not getting involved in those things. And literally, that's been a struggle for me, where I pull myself away from the thinking of just mulling over the issues that we're having to deal with so that I can rest and deal with it. And I think creating that healthy rhythm and balance is so critical for me to be able to handle the pressure and also margin. So rhythm, balance, and margin,
That's what I
creating
was
enough space.
that's what I was hearing as you were talking. You're intentionally creating margin in your week. May not be every single day, but you're creating margin in your week so that your mind can rest and you can have time for the relationships that matter the most to you. And then you're also carving out specific weeks of the year that you can have extended amounts of margin. I completely relate to the struggle of when you're in that time of margin of disconnecting. That's a difficult thing. A whole nother conversation at some point, maybe
Yes.
of how to do that. But yeah, I love that. We are closing in on time, and I want to be respectful of your time.
Yes,
But
sir.
so a lot of questions I'd love to ask you, but I know we've got to wrap up. Just looking ahead, what are some of the long-term goals that you have for both UPCA and for the Pentecostals of Sydney? What are you looking ahead to?
Well, and when I share this, of course, this is again, I'm mindful that this may sound a little idealistic, but by the time I retire as a pastor and as a superintendent, or superintendency is obviously an elected position, but I would love to see 1% of the population of Australia as the constituency of the United Pentecostal Church of Australia, and that would be 260,000 members. We have 26 million people, obviously, in this country. And so what I would love to see is that we aim for and that we get, and it may be 20 years from now, to where we have, well, the population would increase, obviously, significantly by then, but to aim for 1% of the population of this nation. I think that is something that I would love to see and something that we are intentionally aiming for and believing God for, and to see that as part of our national aiming and objectives is 1% of the population, which is at this stage 260,000, which again, compared to say like the Philippines, the United States is really small, but 1% doesn't seem very, very much. But compared to our numbers now, that is quite a significant increase.
Yeah, and that takes growing leaders, growing ministers, growing local leaders of a church, not just pastors, but it requires more people to do the labor, to move to cities that are uninhabited by churches, and it requires great vision. So,
Yeah, and I think for our local church, it would be that we, in the Pentecostal of Sydney, continue to be a training and distribution center of missionaries, disciple makers, church planters. And obviously, that means increasing our capacity as well, including the building itself, but that we would continue to develop that and be sending men and women out to build more churches and to reach more places.
tremendous. Well, I have one last question I want to ask you, but before I do that, just want to check in with you. Anything else that maybe we missed that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think something that may be unique in our church at the POS, and also this is quite common around the churches in Australia, At Pentecostal of Sydney, we have a very multicultural congregation. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, that's reflective of our particular demographics in our community. When we counted our last all nation service last October, we had 54 different nationalities
My
in our
goodness.
churches. Yeah, and
You're
it's quite,
reaching the world in Sydney, aren't you?
yeah, we definitely are. And so for us, that's been a challenge because of all the different cultures and mindsets that have been, that we've had to sort of minister to and also cater for in a sense. The three different types of worldviews that we talk about, the shame, honor culture, the guilt, innocence culture,
Mm-hmm.
and the fear and power culture. That we have been sort of very mindful of and ensuring that we are ministering in that way. But yeah, we have the world, as it were, in our church, and that for us puts us in a place where we are ready to build up more missionaries and people to go out there, reach their communities, and even sending missionaries back to their homeland, which is what we're going to be doing this year. We have a family that is from an island, but Ryan, that's in the Pacific that doesn't have an apostolic presence. It's a tiny island that is so small that they don't have room enough even to build an airstrip. And so, in order for them to
Wow.
get there, they have to fly to the nation of Samoa. The nation is called Tokelau, and they will have to catch a 2-day ferry or boat ride from Samoa to their island nation. And
My goodness.
so there, we have licensed a minister this year. We have 4 of those families in our churches from that particular ethnic or nation, and that family will be heading back sometime this year to start a new work in an unreached nation. So
That is just
that's what
tremendous.
we want to see.
That is
Amen.
tremendous. Well, I have learned through this interview that you are a very disciplined person. And I'm just curious. This is my
I
last
try.
question for you. My last question. Can you tell me, can you tell us about a habit that makes a big difference in your daily or weekly routines besides devotion? What is a habit that really makes a big difference in your daily and weekly routines?
Well, let me just say that, of course, habits are so powerful. God created us with the capacity to do things habitually. And science shows that when you do something out of habit, it uses a part of the brain that uses very little energy. You don't have much, when you do something habitually, you don't even realize it. You're not even thinking about it. And that's the genius of God's creation for us to be able to do that. And I think Charles Duhigg, in his book, The Power of Habit, he details that, which is why he says that oftentimes when a person commits adultery or watches pornography, for example, some bad habit, they do it during the evening at nighttime because their willpower by then is diminished.
Mm.
Willpower is like a muscle; it's a limited resource, and so after so many reps, lifting a weight, you can only do so much. You won't be able to do it anymore. There's a point of failure, and so when
That's good.
willpower is diminished, then and your resistance is gone, your willpower is gone, then you'll have to rely on habit. That's why habits are so powerful. It's so important. You don't need much willpower for habit. You don't need to use much brain power. You don't use the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the part of the brain that processes new information, but it uses a very little energy in the middle part of the brain, and I can't remember what it's called. And so for me, what's been very helpful in dealing with this, with pressures of ministry, with dealing with a lot of the responsibilities that I have, is exercise. And it's, I guess it's not a small habit for me, it's a big habit. I try to do it every day, where I either go to the gym or play tennis once or twice a week. That relieves me of the pressure. It's enjoyable, and of course it releases endorphins, the
Yeah.
hormones that they call the happy hormones, that restores your sense of joy. And that's been for me so very helpful. It makes a difference, and I'm ready to attack what's there for that day, for that week. And I feel great when you're physically strong and healthy. You feel fantastic, and you're ready to take on whatever challenges you have for the day.
Yeah. And I asked you that question and I prefaced it with besides devotion, but I would assume, and I'll just throw in devotion here because I know it's a vital part of your life, that
Yes.
that's what keeps you centered, your devotion and your exercise. If you can have your devotion and exercise on a daily basis, that's what keeps you. You can swing out, you can get out of rhythm. You can have a rough day, but if you can get back to that devotion and exercise, that's what keeps you centered. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Devotion is key. My prayer life and meditating on God's word is the foundation. But and second to that, obviously, is your physicality, your strength, your health.
Yeah.
And I neglected it. For early years of my ministry, we kind of felt that sport or exercise was just not of God. We didn't have time for it. And I realized later on how little I had of physical joy and enjoyment, from exercise, and also for our longevity. That we want to be around for as long as possible. We don't want to. I don't want to spend the last 20 years of my life just in and out of hospital. And obviously, some of those things are beyond our control, but some of those things are lifestyle induced, and so we want to make sure that our health is at peak, optimum level as best we can.
Well, I could keep going all night, but we are out of time. Actually, day for you, night for me. We're out of time here. And Brother Harvey, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I've enjoyed the interview, but I know people are going to really enjoy hearing the wisdom that you have given us today. Thank you so much. I know your time is extremely valuable. You just got back from an international trip just yesterday, and here
Yes.
you are allowing me to interview you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and allowing us to see sort of the inside of a general superintendent's life a little bit.
Ryan, thank you for the opportunity. I'm so honored and so blessed, and keep up the great work. And I look forward to continuing to watch and follow your podcast. It's been so helpful thus far. I'm so grateful that I could get onto that. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So if people want to connect with you some way, are you okay with them connecting with you on social media, or how can they connect with you?
Yes, most certainly. Obviously, Facebook and Instagram. My Instagram is Stanley Harvey POS, all one word, or Stan Harvey POS, and it's Stanley Harvey on Facebook. And if people want to contact me and email me, stan.harvey@upca.org.au.
Tremendous. Well, I'll put all of those links in the show notes for people. So this concludes our show today. My name is Ryan Franklin. Thank you so much for joining us on the Christian Leader Made Simple podcast.